Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Running with James. It is a joy and a pleasure to be with you today. We are back at it, fresh off of a really great episode. I enjoyed last week. Did you guys enjoy last week?
I loved last week.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was nice having
awesome.
having our guests on, Laura, Jess, and Danny. So guys, if you're watching this or listening now, thank you guys for being on the show.
Loved it.
I am not a huge proponent of guests. I want to be honest.
That's actually really true because if it were up to me, we'd have a guest all the time.
Every week, right?
Constantly.
But we are not a guest-centric show, right? We are a information probably first.
Rock dog centered around.
I was going to say
okay.
James-centered.
Speaking of the rock dog. No, I was kidding. You go. Finish what you had to say.
No, go ahead.
We don't like guests.
Speaking of the rock dog.
No, go ahead.
you like
Speaking of the rock dog,
No,
what?
I
Go
want to
ahead.
know what's going on with rock dog.
Someone's coming for the throne.
For rock dog?
Literally today in class, somebody told me, you're working out today because you don't want to lose your spot in the podcast, right?
Nice.
And then he said, they said, I'm not going to.
Well, you've already said he, so
Yeah,
we know it's a
already
guy.
done.
All right, that's already good enough. I'll leave it at that. Let me tell you what I heard first,
Okay.
and I'm going to tell you what he actually said.
Okay.
What I heard was,
Hot gossip.
rock dog, you're amazing. You're awesome.
Okay.
I'm coming for you.
The word rock dog was actually used.
literally used.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want your spot
Yeah.
on the throne.
Yep.
I'm coming for you.
Okay.
But you're awesome.
Okay.
What was actually said was, you're here to work out because you know you're going to lose your spot in the podcast, right? But just so you know, I'm going to take your nickname and I'm going to take your spot on the podcast. I'm coming for you.
Really?
Yes.
Those are
Nice.
some big words.
Yeah.
They're gonna take. So is the throne your spot on the podcast?
They never
or-
said throne. I'm saying throne. But
Oh.
yeah. But throne is you know, I'm top dog.
So I'm just trying to figure out like what's the because I get the whole your spot on the podcast, but what's the other thing they're taking from you?
My nickname.
The rock dog.
I'm pretty sure it'll be their name, dog.
Okay. So
Which will be earned if they do take me down.
So what's the I know you added the throne, but I assumed you meant like your
The
spot,
status.
like your status or your place in the gym. Like,
The throne, the dog, top dog.
Are you top dog?
are you the top dog?
You got to be top dog. Mentally, everybody.
Wait, no, not everybody can be top
Yeah,
dog.
there can only be
There can only be one.
Yeah, if you have a pack of dogs
There's
and there's a
one.
top dog, there's
On
only
today's
one.
workout, I was the top dog.
There's alpha.
So what you're
You're
saying
the
is you had the
alpha?
most reps.
Most reps.
You had the most wall balls
Okay.
because I know what the workout is. 'cause I
Yep,
created
had the most
workout.
wall balls.
So you had more wall
Nice.
balls than anybody else.
Yep.
How many was it?
Okay.
I've done that
Hey,
workout. How
I'm
many?
not gonna do anybody bad.
Okay.
Well, you
49.
can tell us how many you did, and we will know if we
Well,
did
I know I'm
more.
rusty. It's my second high
No,
rocks
because
workout.
they're doing a different workout. Than
Oh,
we did today.
okay.
Yeah, they weren't. He's not ready for that. So, okay, sweet. I'm trying to think who was there this morning. Who would have said that
I
to
would
you?
say I'm about to pull up the picture that I got from the coach,
Yeah.
and like who would possibly say such
Like
a
who
thing.
would be coming for you? I don't understand. So
He who must not be named.
who? was
It
not
is a
being-
he though.
All right. Nice.
I mean, there's really only. Oh, I know who it was.
Oh, you do?
I think I know who it was.
Okay. Well, she knows.
I'm
Sweet.
pretty confident I know who it was
Say
based
it.
on looking at the picture.
Either way, I'll bleep out the name, so say it. No.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I know it wasn't.
I don't know who's in the picture. So
It wasn't
All right,
Mike.
so we're not a guest-centric episode,
we're
concert,
not. So we're not a guest-centric episode.
podcast.
Or podcast, thank you, at all, because I want us to be more informational, right? I want us to be like more educational podcasts, and with a heavy dose of laughter and hilarity and entertainment, right?
Yep.
So just because even with guests, right? Guests are a crapshoot.
This is true. We have had some amazing guests, and we've had some lack of luster guests.
Well, the
We'll
thing
put it
is,
that
it's just
way.
because you're someone who maybe you're knowledgeable or someone who is, like well known in the community, doesn't mean that you're great conversationalist.
It's true.
Right? Or when the cameras come on or you've got the microphone in your face, like sometimes it can be really easy to what do I
Well,
do with my hands?
And I think it's just that it's not like a complete dig at the individual, but like it's that like
We know you like
can
to
be
dig.
really smart and you can know your stuff, but if you don't have, I guess, the shimmer, the personality,
The gift of gab.
I
the
need
gift
you to
of
put the camera on
gab.
me real quick.
the gift of gab, right?
just wanted
there.
them to see my
That's the
face.
shimmer. That's what shimmer looks like.
No.
I've never
So
heard
are you
of
saying
shimmer.
you're shimmering every time we have an episode?
I'm
Shining,
something.
shimmering, splendid.
I'm something every time.
Something is right.
Something.
Something is right. So, but I thought they did a wonderful job.
They did.
I listened to the podcast. I had to listen
They
to
did
it a
great.
few times because I had to listen to it to make sure there wasn't something I needed to cut out or we needed to make some edits, right? So I'm the last line of defense before it gets uploaded. And then once it's on, I have to listen to it to make sure we get credit for a listen.
Yes.
Because I don't know if y'all are listening.
I do. I listen to it.
And I found it very entertaining.
I found it good.
I
liked it a
thought the
lot.
ladies sounded like they sounded natural and they sounded
did.
relaxed.
Very beautiful.
And it was just like having a conversation.
It was like having girl time with my 3 best one gal pals and then these 2 knuckleheads. It was beautiful. I will say, Danny is like, obviously we all know Danny's like one of the sweetest people you'll ever talk to. And the fact that she was taking so many digs at you was hilarious.
I mean, there's obviously something inside that she's holding in, and
Deep
she was
seated
using this as
rage.
an opportunity to get it out. So it's okay. I'm fine. I mean, I did send a message and say after listening to it, I did feel like y'all were a little mean to me.
I was listening to it. I was like, man, I was going after James a lot.
Yeah,
You were
yeah.
really seizing
and they were
the
all jumping on the
opportunity.
bandwagon. But it's okay, guys.
Top
I
dog.
mean, like I said, I'm okay with it. I can handle it. I didn't take it personal. Much of it was true. So, like I said, you can't get mad at stuff that's true.
I will say the one thing I listened at the very end, and it did make me laugh, was, and I just said it to Rocky, I was like, I referred to it as his eulogy. His ramble sounded like a eulogy, like he should be saying dearly beloved before it because of just how he starts everything.
Yeah.
Like we are gathered here today to celebrate women.
So, ladies, once again, thank you for being on the show. We enjoyed you having you, and you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Again sometime. So I was gonna say you're welcome anytime, but that wouldn't be true. But at some point in time,
limited guests.
At some point in time, we'll have you on
If
again. So
how about this, Jess? When you get those Olympic trials, you're welcome back on.
there we go. So, so we do have another guest coming up in a couple
Yeah.
weeks. So Mr. I Run for Tacos himself. So that'll be fun, I think. But we're gonna take the next few weeks, and we're just gonna have some fun with ourselves. Right?
Yes.
We're just gonna enjoy
Our company.
like our own team here. I think, was this your idea?
Today,
I don't want to take credit.
today's episode.
case
I think
fails.
today's episode was Rocky's
it was definitely
idea.
a Rocky idea.
Oh, definitely not me, was it?
Yeah,
I'm
no,
pretty
it
sure it
was
was.
100% you.
I'm
I
pretty
thought
sure
it was you.
No,
Nope.
that was all you.
I'll check the screenshots later, and I'm going to post it on the video right here.
Okay. Nice.
I thought you were pointing like right at my head, like, right over my face.
So today, this is one of those episodes I feel like it's either people are really gonna love it, or they're gonna be like,
Click.
yeah, just end.
Honestly, I thought that as I was doing the research, but I was like, this is actually kind of fascinating, pretty cool
Yeah.
when you really like think a little bit on it. But we'll get to that in a little bit.
Well, I love it because I am, people may not know this about me, but I love history.
You really do.
I really love history because I believe, number one, if you don't know where we come from, right, it's really easy to make the same mistakes that others have made in the past, right? So one of the things that cracked me up about Danny last week is she was like, I listen,
Oh,
but I'm
yeah.
hard-headed and I've got to do it my way.
She's got to learn her way first.
Right.
to
I'm
see what
going to have
works.
to just learn the hard way. And I mean, some of that I think is true too. I mean, she listens, but not all the time.
Was that your impression of Danny?
I thought it was pretty good.
Okay.
that was almost spot on.
Thank you. But I would prefer to learn from other people's mistakes than to make like a mistake that's unnecessary, right? And so I love history. I love learning about history, and history is very fascinating. Like how we've come to be where we're at today, it's amazing to me. It's like some of it doesn't make sense, and obviously a lot of it is on the back of a lot of pain and suffering of other people, right? And so I think that if we look back over time and we look at running specifically, running has a very rich history. People ran to survive, right? People ran to hunt.
Yep.
It was a form of communication, right? So like they would have runners
Yep,
that would
transmitters.
run one thing, information to another,
Messengers.
whatever. It was done as military training, right? So to increase, strength and endurance. There had like cultural and religious significance to it. It was obviously sporting events, right? So there were Olympics before there were Olympics.
Yep.
Yeah.
Health and fitness, right? So it's just something people have always done, right?
mean,
for health and wellness.
The progression of running from like what it started or like what it mechanically is, just like natural in our bodies, to like modern day, like what we see as modern day running. There's so much in between.
Yeah, I don't want to quote the book, but I'm going to quote the book. We're born to run.
Yeah, no,
to
for
run.
sure.
Yeah.
No, from the moment, and it's actually really cool too, like because I do work with a lot of kids. It's really neat to see kids running, and so a lot of the things that I work with adults on when it comes to running, really what we're trying to do is we're trying to unlearn bad habits.
Yeah, unlearn
right?
and relearn.
You're trying to
100%.
unlearn like muscular imbalances, bad habits you develop because of injury, stuff like that. But when you watch kids run, they have a natural like good form.
Yeah.
Very naturally beautiful form, right? From a toddler.
The body just knows what to do.
It does the right
It
thing.
hasn't learned anything differently yet.
Right. And so we're, much of what we do is learned, whether good or bad. So, learning about, I think the history of running is extremely fascinating. And when I first started running things like the marathon, I didn't know I knew the marathon was a long way, but if somebody had said, how far is the marathon? Right. I knew so I've heard people say like, how far is your 5K marathon? Right. People don't realize that a 5K and a marathon are
Very
two separate
different
things, right?
yeah.
But I knew a marathon was a long way, but I didn't know it was 26.2 miles, right? And I knew a half marathon was, 13 to 14-ish miles or 12 to 14 miles. And I only knew that because I ran Spartan Beasts, and the Spartan Beast was always 12 to 14 miles, right? So I knew it was a long way. And so, once I started learning how to run, I was watching different videos and doing different classes, and they would always have a little information about like how the marathon started. And it was very interesting to me that, marathoning itself has technically been going on for like thousands of years, right? And so, I think it's very interesting, and I think it helps us to understand a little bit more that we're not the first ones to do it, right? It's been going on for a little bit.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, specifically since you mentioned the marathon, I mean, the marathon came about because of someone, like you said before, was a messenger.
Yep.
Like we are literally
That's
like,
the history behind it.
That's
yeah.
the history behind it. But like it's the act of us running 26.2 is almost like it's an honor. It's like an honor of someone who was running to alert. Was it Greek? Who was it? Of the Persians, the defeat of the Persians.
Well, we'll get into that, I guess. Since we'll give the correct
You'll
information.
give the
And his actual name.
Yeah, we'll give the correct information.
I can't pronounce his name.
It's okay.
I'm not gonna try.
But I think the thing we want to start out with, or I would like to start out with, is specifically that, like overall, the importance of running kind of transcends like practical necessities to become like deeply ingrained in human culture.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I say, right? So it serves as like a symbol of resilience, and even more competition.
Yep.
Right? And then there's this form of satisfaction, whether you're competing or not, in like running a distance you've never ran before.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe not a distance, but like even time wise,
Yeah.
right? So, I think from, short distances to, long distances to like ultra long distances, running, I think, really is like ingrained in our culture. And like Rocky said, we're born to run, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think, Rocky? What do you feel like for you, like what are some important historical things? What are some things about running? Like if you were to start out with, what would you think? What would you say? And it doesn't have to necessarily be with the marathon itself.
Oh, that's how we ate back in the day.
Okay.
Like that's literally
like
ran to
hunted?
survive.
Yeah.
And we're not fast when it, like compared to a lot of animals. But what we have is we have conditioning. We can outrun them.
Yeah.
We have the pace.
There's definitely some theories that say that early man
Yeah.
would just outrun and outlast the things they were chasing down, right?
Because the cheetah's a fast land animal, but they can only go so far.
Right.
We can literally run ultra marathon. Like there's a one I think Spartathon, which is like 150 miles.
Yeah.
There's like these crazy events, but we literally ran to survive. That's what we started off as hunter gatherers. We had to run. We had to survive, and so that's our lineage. So
Yeah.
it's ingrained in us, and we've only gotten faster, I hope.
Yeah.
And we don't know the times.
No, we don't. That's something that's interesting to me too, right?
Yeah.
So we have these records, but it's like records we've only been keeping for like 100 years, and
Oh,
we're
yeah.
like, oh, this is the fastest guy of all time.
we
You
have no
really think
idea.
there's nobody else that's been faster
In
than
the
them
history.
in the hundreds of thousands or however many years this Earth has been on, in existence? That's interesting to me. So, Lauren, what about you? What do you think?
What was the original question? Because I was just thinking about that.
Like, what stands out to you first and foremost? Like, what is the most interesting about the history of running, for whatever reason? Like, that stands out to you. Like, the first thing that you would want to learn, or maybe the first thing that was interesting to you when you were kind of like doing some research on the history of running.
I think just the evolution of, how we perceive running has really been fascinating to me because, like Rocky said, it was for survival. It was for hunting. It was how, we had to get from A to B. And now it's become something that consumes culture in diet. It's transcended into you do it to lose weight. You do it to be healthier. You do it for all these other reasons that are not to say superficial, but we're not hunting for our food anymore
doing it for leisure.
necessarily.
Yeah.
This is
They're
our
what?
extracurricular
It's like an
activity.
extracurricular, yeah.
Yeah.
It's become more modernized in that we do it for like a leisure activity. Like that's what it's so glorified as.
I'm always reminded of Anchorman, and he's talking. They're like, Ron, you just you haven't been around much because he just started dating, Veronica Corningstone and stuff. And he's like, yeah, guys, it's been amazing. She introduced me to this thing called. We're gonna do this thing called yogging. I believe.
yeah.
It's with a soft J. It's yogging. It's apparently it's crazy.
yogging.
It's crazy. You just go out and run. You just go out and run, right? I don't know. I
Might
always
be-
think about like early running, like what that was
Yogging.
like, right? So
But yeah, I think that for me is what's really interesting. And then, like you said, we mentioned kids, their bodies just know what to do. But then as we grow up, we go to work, we go to school, where our bodies and our mentalities like really shift with habits and lifestyle and everything. And then everything just kind of, for most people, kind of goes like, not to be mean, but it is. A lot of people, how you deal with a lot of running issues. Like people's bodies just don't move the same way that they were born to because we sit all day. We, sit in a car. We sit in an office. We get lazy in our form. We gain weight. So I think that's all really interesting how, and people think it's like, oh, we weren't supposed to run.
yeah,
You sent me something actually.
that was the thing I had told you about before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually was looking for the real TED Talk on that. I wanted to see the full TED Talk.
Yeah, I don't even know if it was a real TED Talk as much as like some seminar this guy was
Maybe.
doing.
I was
right?
looking for it though, and I'm like, I can't find it. I want to know the whole context of what this guy was coming off of.
Right. All right, so when we think about like running itself, so I mean, yes, running's been going on for thousands of years, and it dates back really like as far as an organized event as far back as like 776 BC, right? So we're talking almost 3,000 years ago. People, right, the ancient Greeks were doing running as an actual sporting event in
Yeah.
their Olympics, in their version of Olympics, right? And so running is, I think the Greeks and the Romans were more, I believe, like with their competitions and their gladiatorial games, and they use running more as like a fitness, more, and there was the aspect of messengers and stuff like that. But I feel like there was a break to an extent of it being a competitive thing until we got to like the early 20th century, right, or the late 19th century. And so, for hundreds of years, they would use running as a form of competition. And then eventually, if we fast forward all the way to like 1908, that's when like the way we know the marathon to be was ran for the first time. And it was done in the Olympics. And here's the interesting story to me about the marathon is, so the marathon itself was based off of the story of, I believe his name was Phidippides.
Is that how you say it?
Okay. And so he was a runner. Like that was his job. He would run and give messages from one army to the next, right? And so the Greeks themselves were at war with the Persian Empire. And so basically what he did was and reason partly why it's called the marathon is he ran at the Battle of Marathon. So when the Greeks, the Spartans and the Athens, they defeated the Persians, he ran a distance of about 25 miles to, and this is, I think, one of the great things that I don't think people have ever heard before. He runs, and when he gets there, he collapses.
Yeah.
And as he collapses, he shouts out, Nike, 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 which means victory, right? So Nike is where Nike comes from, right?
Nike.
So I used to joke around after I'd heard the story when people would ask me if I'd run a marathon, and I was like, no, why would I do something that the first time anybody ever did it, they died, right?
Yeah.
And so I studied more about that story, and actually it wasn't the 25 miles he ran, but he had actually ran to Sparta first, which was like 100 and something miles where the
150.
distance was, to get Sparta to come and help.
Yep.
And they said, yeah, we'll help. We just have to get past our, whatever our festival is, Carne or whatever it is. Then he ran back to tell them and then battled, and then after the battle ran 25 miles to Marathon.
To announce the
Or
defeat
from
of
Marathon, I
Persia.
guess, to Athens. And that's when he died.
Yeah.
Right? So it really took like 300 miles in a full-on war for him to die.
Yeah.
So this guy was obviously...
So this was an ultra
This guy was
runner.
in great shape.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, so I was like, when I heard that story, I was like, well, why do we run 26.2 then if it was 25 miles, the distance, right? So in 1908,
I love it.
in the London Olympics,
Yep.
the Queen wanted
Oh,
the
to
marathon
run past
start and
her.
finish to be
Around her
near
box.
the I guess near
castle.
the palace or what
Yeah,
have you.
the
And so they
palace.
had to extend it about a mile or so for it to do that. And so ever since then,
26.2.
it's become 26.2 miles.
Everyone can owe that to
Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth.
So every time I hit mile 25, I always think, man, I'd be done if it wasn't for the dang queen.
right?
South England.
Thanks,
Motherland.
England.
That's
Thanks,
it. Hey, look,
Motherland.
There it is, right?
So that's why that flag's up there.
So it's things like that to me that makes running even more interesting is because, you know, it was one of those things where they did it a long time ago. We're doing it now in our own form, but we're using some of their history to create events and things that we're doing now. And then even now it's continued to grow. And, you know, I think looking it back at like some of the times and stuff, and you look at like the 1908 Olympics, I want to say the winner of the Olympics that ran was like, well, somebody look it up because I don't want to lie, but I want to say it was like something like 2.5 hours or something. The guy who won the first that London Olympics in 1908. I want to say it was around 2 hours and maybe 2.5 hours.
Okay, hang on.
Tell me.
Okay, I'm trying.
Hurry. I would have already found it.
I know, and
Oh my God.
I'm working on it.
It should be the first thing that comes up.
You would think. You would think.
Oh my God.
It's not. Why is Rocky not helping me? Because now I'm stressed. It's actually, the time is not coming up.
So here's how you do it, Lauren. You go, what time marathon
I literally just typed that in.
1908 Olympics?
I typed it in, and I'm getting everything else. Why didn't you have this in your notes, James?
Look at this.
Did you
right
find
there.
it?
1908 Olympics. First thing that comes up.
There, I'm glad you found it.
Wow, that's crazy. And it's telling the same story. It's telling all that story.
I
And look
don't-
at that.
apparently I don't know how to
Winning
operate
time.
Google.
What do you think the winning time was for the 1908 Olympics?
1908.
And here's the great thing. USA. Johnny
USA.
Hayes was the winner. Second place was Charles Heffron from South Africa. And then third place was Joseph Forshaw. So what do you think the time was?
I'm gonna say 2:10.
I'm going to go with you said 2:30.
Okay. The winning time for the 1908 Olympics, 2:55.
2:55.
snap.
2 hours and 55 minutes.
Hear that,
At that
Jess?
time,
You
you
go
could have
in
been
the-
so close. You and Jess could
I'd
have
have been
so
in the
close.
Olympics. I'd have been in the Olympics. Isn't that crazy? So, but here's what's interesting, right? So now you look at that and you see the progression of that. Do you know what the qualifying time is to run the Olympic trials for the United States? And the United States is not, we're not the best marathoners
For the
anymore,
marathon
right?
distance.
Just to qualify to go to the trials, okay? So in other words, it's like the top 2 to 3 people that win the Olympic trials get to go and run
At the Olympics.
at the Olympics for USA, right? And it has to do with some time standards on when they open up those spots or how many of those spots get actually opened.
Are we talking about for then or now?
I'm talking about right now.
Right now.
So I'm saying the winning time for the
Yeah.
first 26.2
Yeah.
in the Olympics was 2:55.
Yeah.
What do you think just the trials time is
Nowadays.
to just to qualify to go run the trials, not to be able to be on the team, just to be able to be allowed to run the trials?
Sub 225.
For men or women?
Yeah, men or women.
I'm talking men right now.
Okay, sub 225.
Yes, 2:30 sub 2:30.
Nowadays,
Really? Sub 2:30? Like what's sub 2:30? Just 2:29?
Oh, I guess I'll do 2:28.
okay, I'm gonna stick with I'm gonna say 224 then. Sure, 224. If we're going 1 minute under.
All feelings, no facts.
I'll feel.
All feelings, no facts. I want to make sure I'm correct. 'Cause
I feel like I
may have
looked this up
It may have
recently.
changed this year, but I want to make sure.
Yeah, I feel like I looked this up after we talked about Jess doing the Olympic trials.
Yes, I'm correct.
What'd you say?
Yeah, he probably said like 215.
Yeah, 2:18.
218.
That's
Okay.
qualifying standard. So if you have ran a marathon under 2:18 or below,
You can go to those
you
Olympic
can go to the
trials.
trials. Do you know what the Olympic standard is? So there's a standard for the Olympics where you have to be able to run a certain time to be able to run for your country. Okay.
Again,
so
men-
just for the trials, it's 2:18. What do you think the Olympic standard is?
212.
I want to say it's lower, but I don't know. 'Cause I don't know how some other countries are.
Actually, no, I lied.
So there's 3 spots.
Yeah,
I lied.
Okay, 3 spots possibly.
205. I'm gonna say 205.
What do you think?
2:15.
Okay, 208. That only unlocks 2 spots, right? So that is crazy to me, right? The first marathon, you know
It
what,
was 255.
120 years ago or 16 years ago, 255 won it.
Yeah.
And now we've progressed so far that you can't even get in the trials to have a spot to go to the Olympics unless you run a 218, right?
Yeah.
Here's the interesting thing, right? Right now, I think, to me, even more so, that tells you how far we've come is, what do you think the women's qualifying time is? And you said you looked it up, Lauren. So
No, I did. Now I don't remember now, and now I'm on the spot. Oh gosh, what was it? The women's qualifying time for the trials or for the Olympics?
I'm talking about for the trials.
The trials. It was, I think the women was like, oh my gosh, I want to say it was like 2:34. 2:34. I feel like there's a 3 in there.
I'm gonna say 3 hours.
You think 3 hours? I think it's 2:34, 2:43. It's gonna be like 2:43. What is it? It's 2:34. It's 2:30, isn't it?
You're just throwing out numbers.
Yeah.
You have no earthly idea.
No.
Now the thing is, it's kind of a little bit confusing to me. Is you can actually qualify through a half marathon.
Really?
Yes, you can qualify through a half marathon, but it has to be really, really, really fast, right?
So what is
108.
Huh?
Like a 108.
Well, for the men, you can either qualify, or the standard basically is 218 or 103 for a half. For the women, it's 237 or 112. Okay, that's fast. That's 237. So the women, to just make it to the trials, the women have to run a 237.
I was close.
And the winning man, you said 243.
I said 2:34 the first time.
Okay.
Receipts.
Is it 237 though?
Did you just Google it yourself after he said it?
No, I'm Googling it now.
Oh.
He's
Is it
taking forever to
230?
get there.
Is it 237?
It's not. It's 2:37, not 2:34.
That's what I just said.
I know, it's 2:37.
So then you weren't right.
I was close.
Either way, Jesus help me so much, right? Either way, that's like 20-something minutes faster than the winner. So that tells you how far we've progressed in our training and our understanding of what the human body can do in running and things of that nature,
Yeah,
right?
and the half marathon.
And then don't even get me started about world records. Don't even get me started about world records, right? So, I mean, right now, technically the world record's like 2 hours and I think 10 seconds or something like that. And technically someone has broken the 2-hour barrier, right? Eliud Kipchoge in the Ineos 159 challenge, what have you. So just thinking about that, like how far we've progressed, and like some of the accomplishments people have made over the last 100+ years in running, is just absolutely crazy to me.
I'm really glad that we're not running to have to hunt for our food or for survival anymore, because I would die.
I'm running for my spot on the podcast, actually.
You are.
You are.
Really running
You
for.
are. So you are running for survival.
I'm running for survival.
You are
Yeah.
running for survival.
No. Better get to running.
I also found something that was pretty cool. I don't know how valid it is, but when I was doing my research, I found that the Egyptians, like way back in the day, like BC, the king, it's called the Sed Festival. Like the king, if he did a 30-year reign, he had to prove himself to the people after that he can still be king. So
Okay.
he had to run.
Oh,
He had to like do all these different events every 3 years after that 30-year mark.
that's cool.
So yeah, I don't know the validation on all of that, but that was pretty cool. The fact that they had to run to prove themselves too back then, even the pharaohs.
Can you
Right.
imagine making any of your like political leaders like, oh, well, you want to lead this country? Well, let's see how fast you can run.
Let's see how fit you still are.
Well, I think that's actually a pretty good test, I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, because it takes, and this is probably, I think, the thing that I've learned most about running is it takes a lot of discipline, and it takes a lot of work to stay fit through running, okay? I look at people who are in their, so I saw an interesting statistic one time that said that the average person doesn't actually gain weight through the months of January to September. The average person over the course of their lifespan gains 0 weight. They pretty much maintain their weight. Between the months of October and December, the average person gains 3 to 4 pounds.
Shout out to
October
the
to
holidays.
December. Yeah, holiday. I told you when I say holiday fluffiness.
And it's
Okay.
cold. You stay inside.
It's cold. You have the holidays, more sweets, more sugars,
Your
more
body's
higher
trying to stay
calorie
warm.
diets, right?
Daylight saving time.
Well, if you think about that, over 10 years, if you're gaining 3 to 4 pounds, that's 30 to 40 pounds of weight,
That's
right?
true.
So let's say you were 150 pounds when you were in high school. 10 years later, after being married and gaining that 3 to 4 pounds, now all of a sudden you're 180 pounds, 190 pounds. Another 10 years, now you're, almost 40 years old. Now you're 210, 220. Does that sound familiar to any of the people that you've maybe met or known, or maybe your family members?
Oh gosh, yeah.
And the answer is always, well, my metabolism slowed down.
Well, I was
right?
gonna
Or
say-
I got married.
And that statistic's like based off lifestyle. We're not even like talking about like, having kids and like baby weight, not getting rid of your baby weight or anything. Like
sure.
that's just lifestyle.
Yep. So the point I'm making is it takes a good amount of effort to be consistent and keep training and running and do all those things. And so when you run, when you train the right way anyway, it's, to me, the whole concept of when you're an athlete, when I was younger anyway, the jocks were always the dumb people.
That was the cliche.
That was the kind of cliche, is the jocks were really not very smart.
Everyone thought I was dumb.
Because, the jocks get because everybody's so concerned about them performing, they don't put a lot of pressure on them.
You need to focus on football.
You got to focus on football, focus on basketball. So you get a pass and you don't have to worry about your grades, right? But in my experience, every athlete I've known usually is very intelligent. They're very smart and make decent grades or good grades. And you have to be intelligent if you're going to be a real student of like anything you do, any game, right? Football, basketball. I mean, I played basketball and we had a playbook that was thick. And I was the point guard. And as the point guard, I had to know every play in that book. And then I also had to have like, court awareness and high IQ, to know when do I do what do I, when I'm supposed to do it, right? When do I, pass the ball? When do I keep the ball? When do I dribble? When do I like playing defense? So there was a lot to learn. And so you were constantly using your brain. I've learned the same thing about running. Running is not just, it is as simple as just going out and putting some tennis shoes on and running, but it's not as simple as just putting on some shoes and going out and running. There's a lot that goes with it. And if you want to learn how to be a better runner, if you want to improve your form, doing things like drills, which are specifically brain exercises.
Yeah.
You're teaching your brain to do something new.
Yep.
And so there's a level of intelligence that is not just needed, but also developed the more physically active you are. So I feel like that's not a bad test to say, hey, I know you're 50 years old, but you need to be able to go out and run a mile in like 15 minutes or 2 miles in like, 22 or 25 minutes. And I need you to be able to at least be able to do 10 push-ups. If you can't do that, I'm sorry, you can't serve on the Senate.
PFT.
Hey.
That's like it'll be the new standard.
It would help with
like, put
term
that in.
limits, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny that we say that, but like running has been one of those things that it's been a way to kind of test your mettle for thousands of years, right? And so it's great because it develops this sense of not just accomplishment, but discipline as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and in a lot of training scenarios, I feel like through history, like it was also a way of bonding. Like it would bond, like all the training would bond people together. Like they would do these runs together, or like they would, if in battle,
Shout out to the
soldiers would train
Kenyans.
together.
I was thinking of the Kenyans.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
What?
the Kenyans,
They're bonding.
the bonding, because they train.
I don't know
together
what she was
these-
talking about.
So why would you interrupt her?
Because I heard running and bonding, and I thought of the Kenyans.
Okay. Now, do you like it when she interrupts you when you're trying to say stuff?
She usually doesn't.
But it's okay to do it to me.
I'm sorry.
He said, you said she usually doesn't.
Doesn't do it to me.
Okay.
I just did an ad lib. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm not hurt. My feelings are
Well,
fine.
we're trying to be better, right? And much like the athletes of old and new, constantly seasoning ourselves, right? And so if we're constantly talking over each other, it's very rude, and we can't hear what the
Yeah,
other
I've been
person's
holding
saying.
a lot of stuff
so,
in.
like right now, I'm talking, and you're talking over me.
I was replying. I was commenting.
You got to wait till I stop talking before you reply. Over.
Over.
Maybe that's what we should do
Over.
from now on.
Yeah.
Over.
Now we're acting like real runners.
Yeah. Shh. What's the shh?
No, I was going shh, because like the walkie-talkie over. Shh. That's like the
Roger
sound.
that.
Thank you. Shh.
Rocky, so tell me, like, what is something like specifically about running or whatever that, like, really when you were kind of doing your research that really stood out to you, like, historically speaking?
I got two things, James,
Okay.
other than the one I said earlier at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah. About the survival
Yeah,
and hunting.
survival.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll start off with the motherland first.
The motherland.
The tar.
I never know what the motherland is.
My
for you.
actual breed. Well, I don't know
Your
my actual
breed?
motherland.
Breed?
What am I?
You're not really a
My
dog.
ethnicity.
Okay.
Sorry.
Hispanic?
Yeah.
Mexicans.
Mexicans.
Mexicans?
That's how my
Yeah.
dad used to say it. That sounds kind
That's
of
how I say
offensive.
it. No,
Is it?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
like,
Sweet.
your motherland and our motherland might be different.
Oh, yeah. The Tar Humara.
Okay, yeah, the tribe in Mexico.
Yeah.
Word, yeah.
You know, running the mountains.
Yeah.
And they ran barefoot.
Barefooted.
Oh, is this where the book Born to Run
this
was
is where the
inspired
Yes,
by?
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Those are the natural runners. But one I thought that was really cool was how the Incans. So the Incans, they had like thousands of miles of road. Like that's been found they had. But what they had were they had like it was an honor to be a runner for the Incans because
Okay.
these runners they were chosen when they were young,
Mm-hmm.
and so like once you did that, that's all you had to do. All you had to do was be a runner. Like so when they did that, these young males they were trained, but they were also translators. So
Okay.
each one ran 10 miles, get a message, and then he'd get like a shell, like a little thing that he had around his neck, and then he'd relay 10 more miles and like blow a horn when he's a mile out. So the other guy's getting ready. He's like, okay, let me, and he tells them, all right, this is the message. Here's this as well. And that dude runs 10 miles until he reaches somebody else 10 miles later. So
Okay.
that's all they did.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, they didn't have to work for food. Like, that was their work.
Yeah,
That's
it was running.
Yeah, and
That was their
like,
job.
and that was like one of the highest honors they had.
Really?
Yeah.
That is actually kind of cool. I like that. I
Mhm.
like that. So, because most people wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
Right. So, I think one thing to me that really stands out is, well, two things, right? Number one would be barriers, big records and barriers, right?
Mhm.
So, two specific things that stand out to me. One would be Roger Bannister, I'm sorry, the guy who broke the 4-minute barrier for the mile.
And
Right?
he wasn't even competitive till he was 17.
So like it's crazy to me to think about him because him specifically, people said it was impossible to run under 4 hours. I mean, 4 minutes, right? And they said that if a human being was able to run under 4 minutes, they would die. Like that was some of the theories and the philosophies behind like athletics and fitness was that if you were able to push yourself to run sub 4-minute mile, you would die.
Yeah.
Right? So Roger Bannister went out and like did it, crushed it, competed, did it. And it's an awesome photo. You see a photo of him after he crosses the finish line and he basically collapses, right? So he ran that with heart and grit and determination. But here's the crazy thing is after he ran that, within the next like 2 to 3 months, the 4-minute barrier got broke like 10 times. Right. So in other words, it was almost one of those things where people just had to see that it was possible to do it. And then all of a sudden everybody did it. Right. So I think that's one of the crazy things about like running itself or even sport in general is, there seems to be these barriers that happen and then that people think, okay, it's impossible to do it. And then some guy or some person says, no, it's not impossible. They go and do it, and then everybody else's eyes are opened, right? So it kind of goes back to like my whole, our philosophy when we say, don't say can't, right? So overcome I can't, and changing your mind and how that changes the way you look at things. Because if you say I can't, you're right. But if you say you can, you're also right. So it all goes into, I think it has to do a lot with the effort, how you push yourself. And so that was one of those things I feel like is like huge for running, is that he opened up the door for, now the mile world record's like 3:34 or something like that. So that's almost, 25 seconds faster than what somebody thought was like humanly possible before you would die. Right?
Yeah.
That's crazy to me, right? And then the second thing would be, I guess, ladies, right? So you guys know my feeling on the women. I love the ladies. You know what I'm saying?
I love October. We know from
I
last
love
week.
October.
You love October.
I have a wife that happens to be a lady.
Oh, yep. Good for you. She's a lady.
I have a daughter,
Also happens to
also
be
a lady. I have a mother-in-law, lady.
Dang, look at you.
She has a dog.
And then
Lady.
also like 50-60% of the members are
I have
ladies.
all those
I think
same
we established
things.
last week it's 80-20.
Oh, it is like 80-20.
So
That's right.
80%
You're right.
of the BC Fitness members,
Ladies.
So I love surrounding myself with women because I think women are powerful. I think they're strong. And honestly, if I want to be completely honest, I think they're better than men, right? In certain aspects, right? I think they're stronger than men. I think they're able to handle more than men are able to handle physically. But they're very complicated. Women are extremely complicated because of their attachment, I believe, to their emotions and their feelings, right? And that's not a bad thing. That's just how they're made. That's who they are, right? But I'm not a fan of high horses in any capacity. So when they get on their high horses, men, I'm not a fan of it. When men get all, I'm a man, I'm big, I don't like that stuff. There's no need for it, right? We can be nice. We can be strong. We can be like confident without being like overbearing, like
Testosterone.
brutes, right? And then the same thing for women, right? not every woman is mistreated. And not every woman is, disenfranchised, okay? And if you live in the world that I live in today, let's be honest, the future is woman. The present is woman. Lauren, do you have something to add?
2024, the year of more.
No.
See women.
No, just the you have more. Just cut it off on the
DC
more.
women.
No, right? So, but I found it actually interesting that women specifically, when it comes to running, could not run the Olympic marathon until as early as, I think, 1984 or something like that. I think they were the first time they ran in the Olympics was 1984.
Okay.
Okay, so we're talking 30 years ago, right? Or 40 years ago. So that wasn't that long ago that women were not allowed to run in the Olympics, right? Now, part of that has to do with the fact that there weren't a lot of women running that distance at the time, right?
Because their uteruses fell out.
And part of that is because men were afraid for women.
Your uterus will fall out.
That was literally one of the thoughts, was that if you
out.
ran that far, your uterus would just drop out.
Oh, that was like for real? I thought you were
That's for real,
joking.
dude.
Become completely
Because
disconnected from your body
so
and
I think you
fall
mentioned it
out.
last week.
Yeah.
What did you mention last week?
That women are awesome.
No.
Yo, Catherine Switzer.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right, for the Boston Marathon.
Yeah.
A woman jumped into the marathon. She ran the marathon. She had paid for a bib and everything, and she went and ran. And like one of the race directors tried to drag her off of the course.
You can
right?
find a picture of like them, like kind of like it looks like they're tackling her.
Yeah, it looks like the guy's trying to yank her off
Yeah.
or what have you, right? And she just wanted to run it. It's not she wasn't like an elite person, or she just wanted to run it. So she ended up being the first woman to run the Boston Marathon, but she did it technically illegally, right? But they didn't want women running that distance because
They didn't want to encourage other women to do it.
because they were afraid that as a
Medically.
species, like we would end because all these uteruses be all over the ground. Nobody wants to be picking that up. Is it uterus I? I don't know what the plural would be.
Uteri.
Uteri.
I don't know. Uteri?
So much like Roger Bannister, there was a theory or a thought that you would die so they were encouraging people not to do it.
Yeah.
The same thing. So, I mean, I don't even know where the medical basis
I
for
would
that
say
came
doctors
from.
have come a long way.
Right? Yeah, the medical science
The
has come a
thought
long way.
behind it was like, yeah, they can't run that far.
But of all the things, that's the thing I don't. Of all the things, like, I could understand if they said something like women are just weaker and they couldn't handle. I could maybe understand like
that
that.
thought process. I could, you know what? I could understand that thought process as a woman more so than a bunch of. This is what I picture: a bunch of men in their doctor like. What are they, jackets? Sitting around a table thinking about, okay, what could be the downside here? Well, I mean, think about the jostling. What if it just like jostles? What if the uterus it just plop? What if it just right out?
Yeah.
Just right out.
Exactly.
I'm just like imagining all these people who went to medical school coming to that conclusion.
What if it all started with some guy's wife, a doctor's wife, who wanted to go running with him?
And she,
he was
like,
like,
died.
and he was like, no, I don't want to go running with you, and he had to make an excuse to stay with the boys.
That would be actually
And it
perfect.
was, you know what? You can't run, baby. Your uterus is gonna fall
Yeah.
out. And
So it's. I just feel like some rando dude was like, "Hey, we don't want chicks running. What do we think? Uterus fall out? Uterus?
Yeah.
Are we vote? All those in favor of uterus fall out?
Send it to print.
Yeah, done. All right,
It
make it
sou-
a science.
It basically sounds, and well, in that people were believing that
Yeah.
as well, but it's kind of like
Women were believing it.
Women were believing, but it's kind of like modern day, like how you saw the guy who gets on and does a seminar about like your body's just not meant to run. It was invented
Exactly.
by Nike.
Right.
Nike invented running.
Right. So
yeah.
I just think it's funny
And people
that,
believe him.
Like we make up these things that are not based in any type of like whatever, and it holds people back oftentimes, right? And so like women have been though, even with that being said, women still have been competing in running events, even in the Olympics since like 1922. Okay, so women were allowed to run track early on in the early 20th century, and they did some pretty amazing things, right? I think the thing was just, I guess once you hit 20 plus miles, so we all know that there's a wall at mile 20, and when you hit that wall, that's the uterus wall.
that's when it falls.
I mean, I know a lot of women who run. I've yet to see a uterus fall out.
I don't think I've ever even seen anybody grab that area. I'd be like, oh,
Something's happening.
I feel my uterus.
Something's happening.
I don't know why this is so funny to me. So
I mean, the visual. is
But I
pretty
think the thing
entertaining.
is that for a point, it was a very male-dominated sport or whatever. But there were a lot of women doing these things, and I think more of it had to do with just the culture, where like men, they were more in the workforce. They were more on the physical side of things, and women tend to be more at home, right?
homemakers.
Homemakers and stuff. But it was after really World War II when, a lot of the men were gone and women went into the workforce, people started realizing that, and I don't even think, like, some people are like, oh, it's just like the patriarchy and stuff. It was just the culture. It was just how people were raised. It's how people thought. And I don't think anybody had ill will or were like, oh, you're evil or whatever if you let women run or whatever. But then there was a necessity for women to get more active and do more things. And women started getting a taste for it because at a time they probably didn't even care to do it. And they started getting a taste for it. And they're like, hey, I want to try to do these things. And so I think the fascinating thing now is in the sport of running, specifically for the half and full marathon, there are more women running half marathons and full marathons now than men.
Because we get it done. But also, like, how that transition from, like, we think your uterus is going to fall out, back in, like, 776 BC, like, when the Olympic Games were, like, just kind of becoming a thing, there was a series of games for women. It was called the Hera. It was for Hera, the goddess Hera. So Heron Games, and it was foot races for women. So there were women racing.
Yeah. So
in history, it's been a thing.
So let's not get it twisted, ladies. Okay. You haven't been disenfranchised for your entire existence.
But what happened is
Literally,
there was like a
hunter
gap.
gathered. We hunted, y'all gathered.
We gathered. We're in this as a partnership.
giving y'all credit.
And there's some things we're better at, some things you're better at, right? So, Lauren, stop coming in here with that, okay? For thousands of years, y'all been able to run.
So I think it's funny, though, it started out like women can do this because women were seen as strong individuals at a point, and then there was like a gap.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, we like you better at home doing these things.
But was it like we like you better at home?
I don't know.
Or was it like
that's
maybe a
my
mixture?
narrative.
I mean, here's the deal.
Mixture. That's my narrative.
Culture changes so quickly,
Just
right?
true.
And it changes drastically over, even sometimes a very short period of time. And so, I feel like sometimes what is socially acceptable and culturally acceptable isn't usually like necessarily steeped in, what's reality, right? So it's not a necessity. It's just what's okay in culture. And so, that's why I don't really go by what culture says, right? I have what I believe, and what I hold to and what my standards are. And I believe that women are physically capable to do anything they want to do. I believe that women are strong. I believe that women can do all types of things. But I also do know that biology simply states we have more mass, we have more testosterone. So that probably means that we're going to be stronger and bigger,
biology,
right?
yes. From a biological standpoint, yes.
So that doesn't mean that women can't do great things. And I can guarantee there's a lot of women out there that are stronger and faster than me.
Well, and I will say women, I think, as you said, like now, what was the statistic you gave? As many women?
There's more women running the half and full marathon now than there are men.
Yeah. So I think what's funny about that is, like, for so long, like, women were told they can't do these things. And now we're like, we don't like being told we can't do something, especially by men. So we're like, watch. That's what I think.
And that might be it. Or maybe it's just they enjoy doing it.
I think it's also camaraderie. I think it's a lot of like what we said with the girls last time. There's a lot of camaraderie. Women get in the sport and you find a lot of there's a lot of bonding.
Sure.
A lot of female bonding, a lot of women lifting other people up or other women up. So I think there's a lot of that to do with it now.
Well,
too.
so I think that's why I say I love history so much. Okay.
You're really good with history.
Because with history, one of the things is if you look at how like some of the cultures were formed and some of the city states and nations and the rise and falls of these places, and you can see like usually what the downfall or what the mistakes were, and a lot of it usually has to do with pride and attitude. Okay. And so having a sense of confidence and a sense of accomplishment in doing something that's hard, I think is awesome, right? But doing something in spite of other people or doing something to prove a point, I think it doesn't do yourself a service, because number one, you may not succeed. And when you do, you fall flat on your face and then your whole argument is out the window. Number two is you're not doing it for the right reason. You're doing it to prove somebody else is wrong rather than to improve yourself or to strengthen yourself, right?
Sure.
And so when we have that mindset about things, I think it can lead to like a destruction or a fall, right? And so, there was a time, right, when, black people weren't allowed to, be in sport, right? They weren't allowed to run. There was, separate baseball leagues and basketball leagues and stuff for black folks, right? There was a time when, women weren't allowed to, run the marathon. And, there was even a time they couldn't run in the Olympics, right? They could play tennis, but they couldn't run. So some of it has to do with just there weren't enough women to justify it.
Yeah.
And there weren't enough women that were good enough, right? So I don't know if you saw it last year, or not last year, but the last Olympics. And I believe it was the 100 meters. And it was one of the first few rounds of the Olympics. And there was a young woman. I'm not going to tell you what country she was from, Iran. And she got in there and got in the blocks and took off, right? And she got dusted. And when I say
really?
dusted, like I'm talking like all the other women went out like the Flash, right? And they were running like, 11 second, 10 second, whatever, 100 meters. She looked like she was out there jogging.
Oh, wow.
Right? So she got in there.
Because she was one of the only.
Because she was the only woman, right?
in
That
her
I
country.
guess that went in but she didn't meet the standard of the Olympics. And so that's a lot of why nowadays they have a standard that you
Yeah.
can't even send anybody if you don't meet this, right? Because it's embarrassing, right?
Yeah.
And so they were like, oh, well, I don't know how this happened and da-da-da-da-da. And so it was like one of those things where if you're not in a sport and you're not doing the sport, you're probably not going to be great at the sport,
Yeah.
right? And so the more people get involved with it, the more you train, then obviously the higher the standard can be. And so I think some of it just simply was that for cultural reasons, for historical reasons, there were certain people who weren't allowed to do certain things, and so there weren't a bunch of people trying to do it because it just wasn't worth it, right? Or they weren't interested in it. And then they started seeing people break barriers, and they started people like forcing their way kind of into it.
Yeah.
And people were interested, and they wanted to try it, and they wanted to do it, and then they felt like, oh my gosh, I'm actually pretty good at this. And then all of a sudden, the standards needed to be raised because people were getting better.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that that pretty soon there's going to be a lady that breaks the hour barrier for the half marathon. Like I'm convinced, right? So I want to say last year, I think 106 or 105, Sarah Hall, I think, broke the Houston half marathon record. Okay, and she ran like a 106, right?
That's so fast.
And I think there's ladies that have ran like 103 I've seen or what have you.
fast.
So like it's going to be soon that a
So
woman
fast.
is going to break the 59. What? What are you laughing at?
I got
So I'm convinced. And then who's to say that in another 30 years, 50 years, that a woman's not going to break the 2 hour barrier too? Once it gets broken, the sky's the limit, right? The sky's the limit. I want to say that in the last 3 years, the female marathon record has been broken like 5 or 6 times, right? And not like small margins either. So I think now it's somewhere around 212 or something like that. So it's not going to be long before that 210 barrier is broken. And then who knows from there, right?
Yeah.
So I think as training develops and
The technology.
develops, right, for shoes and training, and people are learning to stay healthy longer.
Well, like the data for like watching like your health data. I don't know.
Your biological
Thank
data,
you,
your
that's the
biology, the
biology.
biological data, right? The physiological data. I think all of that stuff. There's just so many and that's what is amazing about running is there's so many little things that you can do to help yourself get faster or get stronger. But you only know that if you look at the history of running, right? If you look at like where we've come from and you see some of these standards, right? I'm amazed, honestly, when you look at like things like the 400 meter, the 800 meter, the 100 meters, right? How far we have come in the last 100 years. Like the amount of time they have taken off of those distances just sheerly out of experience and data and knowledge and training evolution, right? If you look back, I don't know, we'll say to the 1980s, right? If you were a runner, what did you probably just do?
Bought yourself some Nikes.
Maybe.
I
don't
mean,
know.
very possible. It was very big right then.
Maybe. You ran.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably it. You ran.
Yeah. It was
Now-
becoming a very trendy thing in the 80s.
Now they run, they lift weights, they do tons of drills, they run, they lift weights. So weight training and cross training and stretching and yoga, ice baths and all this stuff is like just part of their normal regimen, and they're not just going out and just
running
hard all
Yeah.
the time, right?
Yeah.
So probably one of the first runners, and he was obviously like before my time, but one of the first famous runners that I was aware of was Prefontaine.
That's my favorite.
Steve Prefontaine. He was my favorite. A movie came out. A part of his movie came out when I was younger about his life, right? And about Nike and Oregon and everything else. And like the way they portray this guy, he was an unstoppable force of nature, right?
Yeah.
And he had a quote. Do you remember the quote by chance?
I don't run. You got it.
Look it up. I want you to look it up because I
I
want
have it
you
in
to
my
say
notes.
this quote. Because I want you to use this quote.
In his ramble or just in general?
No, just right now. I want him to look it up. Just put Prefontaine,
I have it in my notes.
Steve Prefontaine quote.
No, I have it
Just
in my
write it up.
notes.
It's
I
really
run
good.
because it's my I run because it's my passion and not just a sport. Every time I walk out the door, I know why I'm going, where I'm going, and I'm already focused on that special place where I find my peace and solitude.
Okay, that's great, but that's not the quote.
Oh, my fault. That was one I had in my notes.
Oh, okay. No, that's not it. It's the most famous one.
Sorry, listeners.
To give,
To give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift.
say it one more time.
To give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift.
That is an awesome quote. I
That is
think.
actually a really
That is
good
a really
thought
good
that was a
quote.
Buddha.
Now, he was, because his coach was always trying to get him to like pace himself, right?
Yeah.
So his coach is like, start slow, finish hard. And he would always argue with his coach because he'd say, I only run one way, all out, from beginning to end, right? And so his coach was always trying to teach him the concept of negative splits and like learning how to like pace yourself through a race. And this was one of his quotes that somebody would ask him about something, you know, talk to him about like pacing and about, you know, why do you always go out and lead the race? Why do you always, because he always would run, he wanted to run up front and he wanted to stay up front, right? And so they would
So he was
ask him.
Jessica.
Huh?
He was Jessica.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
right? So they would ask him, like, you know, why do you do that? And this was his quote, right?
Yeah.
Right? To do anything less than my best is to sacrifice the gift. We have all been given a gift, right? We have the ability to move and to run. And if we don't give our absolute best, I believe we sacrifice the gift that we've been given, the gift of movement, the gift of learning, right? If we're not trying to constantly learn, if we're not trying to constantly, be better today than we were yesterday, then we truly are sacrificing this gift that we've been given. Think of all the people that you know in your life that at one time, maybe they were athletes, whether it was in high school or college, right? And now you like to look at them, you know, when you talk to them and they talk to you about your fitness, they're like, oh yeah, I used to be this,
Yeah.
right? I used to be able to do this, you know, or whatever. But now I got bad knees
So
or
many
whatever.
people I talk to.
Now I got a bad back, right? I was like, oh man.
Wait till you get older.
Yeah, you wait till
That's
you
what
get older.
I hear all the time.
right?
Wait till you get older.
So I was running actually
That sounds like a threat.
in a neighborhood, it was my neighborhood basically, and I was doing some speed work, okay? And I was it was like an interval session, and I was on my break. And as I was jogging by, this guy leans out the window. He's like, oh, my goodness, man. You get it, bro. You get it, man. He's like, man, I used to run like that too, man. I used to run like that too, man. He's like, you just wait till you get old. You just wait till you get
Oh, my
old. And I was
goodness.
like, I hear you, bro. I was like, how old are you? He said, 42. I was like, really? I'm 45. And he just got quiet.
Did you just keep on going?
And I just kept jogging.
That's
right?
great.
So, like, we have this ability to be amazing, like, physical beings. And oftentimes, because either it's our mindset or because we're just not willing to put in the work, we can sacrifice this gift, right?
Yeah.
So in the gym, and mainly I use it for the kids, but it really is across the board for everybody, right? But we have two very specific rules that, you know, kind of pertain to this. Rule number one,
Never say I can't.
don't say can't, okay? Because whether you say can or can't, you're usually right. Rule number 6, never give up, okay? And so when you go out and give your best effort, whether you are faster than everybody else doesn't matter. When you go out and give your best effort, you are truly giving the best of yourself, and the reward is that you gave your best. And if you keep giving your best, you will keep getting better. If you keep giving your best, you will keep getting faster. If you keep giving your best, I don't care how old you get, I don't care what happens, you are always going to be successful, right? And so many of us, I've been guilty of this in the past, is we give less than our best. We give just enough, right? Think of people in work, right? In the corporate world today. Most people complain about how much money they make, and when you ask them, you know, what does your day look like? Most of their day is spent on Facebook and wasting time. So
Doom
that,
scrolling.
huh?
Doom scrolling.
Exactly. And so, companies nowadays have to put like monitors on their computers. They give people like times they
Filters.
have to like check in and check out to make sure people are truly working,
And not like just sitting on the Instagram,
getting a paycheck, right?
YouTube.
When you could probably go in and if you truly gave your best, oftentimes I feel like we don't succeed because we don't put our full effort into it. Because maybe we don't like it or maybe we're not interested, I don't know. But we don't give our best.
Well,
But anything less than our best sacrifices the gift.
Well, and I feel like also nowadays there's also this need for instant gratification, immediate results. So people do the doom scrolling thing at work because they want that immediate hit of like serotonin from
Sure.
like looking at a funny video, or people want to see like an immediate result in the gym. So they go and like lift something heavy once or twice, like 2 reps, and feel really accomplished. I deadlifted 300 pounds, but like that's all they can really do.
Sure.
So I think it's a lot of that comes down to like people really just want to feel good right in the moment, but they don't really want to work hard to feel good in the long run.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is kind of the great thing about running, right? And oftentimes whether it's through high rocks or obstacle course running or, really any sport, basketball, football, whatever, is to me the most challenging portion of all of those events is the running. Because running is something that you can learn how to do a monkey bar like that.
Yep.
Right? You can learn the technique.
Yep.
Most people are strong enough just naturally if they learn the technique to get through with it.
Most people come
Okay.
off just because like, oh, it's uncomfortable in the hands. It's not that they can't. It's that it's new and it's
Might hurt
uncomfortable.
their hands, right?
Yeah.
Their hands just haven't been seasoned for it, right?
Exactly.
80% of the people that come into the gym, I can get them up a rope
Mm-hmm.
first time, right? First class, people come in, I can teach them how to get up a rope.
just technique.
Because it's just technique, right? But running is one of those things that if you really want to be halfway decent at it, you have to invest
You do have to
yourself into it.
practice.
You have to practice it, and it takes time to develop.
Yes.
So it teaches you discipline. It teaches you consistency. It teaches you that what you put into something is what you get out of it.
Yep.
And so I think that for me, the history of running really is much like the history of man in that the more we put into it, the more we get out. The more we give our best, the best of ourselves is what comes out. And so to me, the history of running truly is the history of the greatness of what we're capable of doing. Whether it was the pharaohs or what have you, whether it was the Greeks, whether it was, women in the 1960s or what have you, whether it was Eliud Kipchoge, it doesn't matter to me. Running truly is one of those ways that we can take out the best of ourselves and compare it to ourselves, not competing with anybody, just to go out there and show ourselves that we can do things that are amazing.
Rap facts.
Rocky,
What
do you
up?
have a history ramble to help us wrap up today?
I don't know if it's history, but I got a little something. As you've heard today, dearly beloved.
Oh my goodness.
No, just kidding. But yes, James kind of just hit it on the point right now. Like, it's the history of man. And I think right now we're so caught up in the technical side, the shoes, the GPS, the whatever I'm
The
wearing, all the
gadgets.
gadgets, all that. And right now, like, running running's so much better than that.
Yeah.
Like, if you actually just love running. So that's what I'm going to say in this ramble. I just challenge all you guys to take. We're not Eliud Kipchoge. We're not, unless you are a competitive, like very competitive, you're an elite runner. Your next run, no gadgets, no headphones, no watch, your phone to be safe, but just simple run, you and the outside, and just enjoy that run. Enjoy it 100%. Do it with people so you can talk the whole time, but no watch. You don't need to be validated by anybody else. You know how much you ran technically in your head if you do the same map that you usually run, but do that. That's my challenge.
Lauren's like, no, because if I don't have data, it didn't count.
Yeah.
I gotta know, I gotta let James know that I got my stuff done for the day.
When was the last time you sent me that you ran?
Well, no, but don't you follow me so you can see it if you wouldn't check.
I ain't got time to look up everybody's runs. That's why you're supposed to send them to me.
I am supposed to send it to you. I was gonna say, James, you carried this episode very, very well, and it does show like how when you talk about it, like how much you really do love like history and how passionate you can be about it.
Sure.
So you carried this very well.
What's my compliment?
You did really well too. But he kind of like carried the show for this one.
Well, so there's this thing, and
History is a struggle for me. Let's put it that way.
I mean, I don't understand. I don't get that. So, because like,
I don't know why. I just struggle with remembering things.
well, then that's not history. That's
Memory.
focus.
Focus, maybe.
That's probably just focus, right?
Probably.
So there's like I love going. Like that's what I loved when we went to Manchester.
Yeah, you were
right.
so
I loved
intrigued
like
by all
seeing
that.
those castles and stuff, and like seeing how they lived back then,
He
right?
gets so giddy in like one of the fortresses that we were visiting.
It was really cool.
He was so giddy.
When we went to York, York was so cool
Yeah.
because they had remnants of castles. They had this wall that went all the way around the city.
It was
and you
like,
could basically
yeah,
walk the whole
the
wall.
whole perimeter.
So the cool thing to me was that this thing is like 1,000 years old, and but people are living like they've just continued to add on to this 1,000-year-old city, right? And they've worked it around the existing like castle and city that was there before, and it's been sacked and it's been destroyed and rebuilt, and it was first like a Roman city, and they built on that, and so just there's so much history that's been there, and so there's so much that's happened and developed. And the thing is that they were speaking a different language than we speak today, but they weren't that much different than us.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe they didn't have electricity, but they still needed to get up in the morning. They still had families. They made jokes, and they had sad times, they had fun times, they had hard times. They were still human beings, and they still lived life. And many of them did their best to live life to the fullest. So it's just like we're trying to do. And so I don't know. I just love like being in those types of things, and just I almost feel like you can feel the history, like you feel something about it. And I guess I get excited about it because I've lived in Houston my entire life, or out in the country of Houston. And Houston is a very, even though, the city's been around for a couple hundred years, everything here is new.
Yeah.
We have nothing old.
No.
Right? There's nothing that's several hundred years old.
No big history here.
Right? So, except for the trees and the wilderness, right? And a lot of that's changed so much.
Yeah, a lot of that's getting taken down.
So, it's like even forests that are here, they didn't look like that 100 years ago,
Yep.
right? So, I love that, just being connected to that. And when you actually start doing a dive into history, whatever it is, it's just you look at the American history, you look at the history of the British Empire, you look at World War II, like little things. And Laura she was laughing at me because I told her I was watching this thing about Hitler, and this dude was is probably the most hated person of all time, right? But his rise to power, how he went.
He was actually very smart.
How he went from a nobody, literally a nobody, to
people
the
followed
ultimate
him.
dictator, and almost
taking over the world.
People were worried about him taking over the world.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me, right? Now, I am not a proponent of Hitler, Napoleon, any dictator, Mussolini, none of these people, okay? Out of Stalin, none of them. I don't agree with their philosophies. But they literally, if you look at history, the Roman Empire, basically, these people just didn't give up.
Yeah.
They just kept going.
Resilient.
They just kept. The dude was his mom died at a young age. His dad was abusive. He went to school. He wanted to be an artist. He failed art school. He got out. He joined the military. He was actually a really good soldier. Then he came home. He started his own. He basically joined this party, took over the party. Then all of a sudden, that party was the smallest party in Germany. And somehow, over the next couple of years, it became the most popular party. And then ipso facto, somehow he runs for the president, doesn't win, becomes chancellor, and then a year later, he's in charge of everything.
Yeah.
So his whole concept was he just never gave up, right? You look at the Punic Wars or what have you. Rome and Carthage were these two empires, and Rome was a very small empire, and Carthage was so much better than them, and they kept fighting, and somehow Rome won. And the only reason Rome won is because Rome never realized that they were losing.
Yeah.
Right? Rome kept getting defeated battle after battle after battle.
But they just kept going,
They just kept trying. They kept coming back. They kept trying new strategies. And so there was a quote that really stood out to me that one philosopher said, and the quote was simply this, is the vanquished is not vanquished if they don't realize they're vanquished. Oh. So in other words,
ignorance is bliss.
If you don't give up,
ignorance is bliss.
you've never failed.
Yeah.
So that to me is what I think I find interesting about like history is like if you look at history, the greatest people, the greatest accomplishments, the greatest empires, the greatest of everything simply came down to this. It wasn't that they were better or like really that much smarter than anybody else. They just had the determination and the will to never give up. Right? So
So think about that when you go out for your next run.
that's why I think history is so fun and so interesting is that because most of us put these people on these pedestals that, oh, they were a brilliant tactician or, you know, they just had all this, what do you call it? All these benefits, right? They had all this like, they were nobles or whatever. But really, the greatest and strongest people in history just had the determination and the willpower to say, I don't care what you say, I ain't quitting.
Shout out to Napoleon.
Right? Shout out Napoleon. He's actually his story is really good. It's a really cool story. So just thinking about that kind of stuff, that's why I think it's fascinating. And you should watch this. On YouTube, there's a channel called Oversimplified.
I've heard of it.
It's called Oversimplified. And he does these like funny little cartoons and it's horribly drawn. Or not horribly, it's just not great.
Yeah.
And he goes through some of the histories of like some major events, and it's really good. It's entertaining, but then it gives you some information. But like if you struggle with like remembering
remembering
things,
anything,
right?
yeah.
Or like being able to engage in like
Yeah.
the subject of history, like you would like it.
Would I?
Seriously,
Okay,
it's
I'll
good.
check it out.
It's called Oversimplified.
I definitely struggled.
I think it's time to move over to the first ever Patreon episode.
I think so.
yeah.
I think so.
This is good.
Yeah.
This is a good segue.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to continue on with our first Patreon episode. So, if you're a supporter of the show, if you're a member of the show, you're going to get to hear what's next. The rest of you guys, thank you for coming in today. We appreciate it. If you haven't done so, please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, rate the show, and we'd love for you to become a member as well. There's different tiers, starting from free all the way up, and everything gives you some extra benefits. So, thank you guys for coming in. Remember,
If you can change your mind,
Then you can change your life.
wonderful.
peace.